ACB is crushing the libs at these hearings. Trump officially beats COVID. Fauci says he's not political. And what happens if nobody wins on Election Day? Welcome to the Buck Sexton Show, friends. We can count the days now pretty quickly, can't we, before Election Day? And yet, this entire week, pretty much all the political oxygen in the room, so to speak, is going to be taken up by this ongoing Supreme Court justice hearing, as if the political stakes couldn't be any higher. We have Democrats watching their favorite toy of policy. Right? It's supposed to be a revered judge, number of judges who interpret and apply the Constitution. But as we know, it really is just the Democrat super legislature. They love it. They think it's fantastic, as long as it gives them what they want. This is the jurisprudence of a 5-year-old. It should be that way because I want it that way. That's really what the living Constitution, left-wing, activist judge approach to all this is. But the good news for all of us watching is that Amy Coney Barrett is smarter and a better lawyer than all these people who are questioning her. I'd also say that some of the members of the Senate Judiciary, as you're seeing them and watching them question, and they're deep into their 80s. I just want to know, is this now an expectation that everyone should have, that when you're in everyone else, usually you think about retiring or moving into other capacities in your life, but not if you're Dianne Feinstein or Leahy. You get to do this until you're 100, it seems. Okay. There's, I guess, no surprise then that they pretend that Joe Biden being almost 80 when he becomes president is somehow not indicative of possible problems with his health and his acuity. Regardless, Coney Barrett doing a great job today. They kept coming at her with the same version of a question that she had already answered, which is effectively, how would you deal with this case, or what do you think of this precedent? So you have no thoughts on the subject? Dianne Feinstein condescendingly and very stupidly asked her, after Barrett had already explained a dozen times that as a sitting federal judge, she isn't allowed to say what she would decide on specific cases. She just keeps having to say it, because ultimately this is about Democrats grandstanding an election cycle for their own purposes while pretending that they care about the Constitution, while making this big show of how much this is about some broader principle, when it's just not. ACB did a phenomenal job today. You had to watch her to really appreciate some of the nuances and the deft manner in which she parried all these different assaults, all these different efforts to undermine, to entrap. She's just better at this than they are. She's just smarter. Thank God. Absolutely qualified, and a female, because you know if she was male, you know this. The Democrats would come forward with some version of, he touched me a long time ago, even if I can't prove that I was ever in the same state as him. And the Democrats would all say, a credible allegation. Destroying the word credible in the process. An allegation with no underlying facts, evidence, or support shouldn't be considered credible just because somebody makes it and has a quiver in their voice and looks like they're about to tear up. That doesn't mean that someone's telling the truth, libs. We found that out during the effort to destroy Kavanaugh. And also, I think Democrats are really seeing the right is entirely unified on this. There is no dissent. Anybody who is saying don't push through Amy Coney Barrett is a fraud and a hack, helping the other side for their own purposes. They don't think it helps conservatism or constitutionalism or even the rule of law. We are absolutely united on ACB getting through, as well as calling her ACB because it makes the people who created the cult of RBG so very, very angry. It is fun to watch them melt down over that. You can't use her initials. Watch us. So this is a moment when the Democrats learn that there is a price to be paid, and I think it's a very important lesson. The price to be paid for what they did to Kavanaugh, which, as I've said to you, radicalized many people. In fact, really turned my thinking much more toward wartime conservatism in our politics. can't give in to the other side, must win. We're not at a point where a truce or an armistice is advisable or even really possible in our politics. They have to lose and understand that the insanity, the far left lunacy that they continue to push for is incompatible with our system. That's all there is to it. And that's why pushing through this nomination, really just fulfilling the constitutional obligation of an open Supreme Court seat with a Senate in session and a president who's already made the appointment, this is the definition of constitutional. And yet they still play all these games saying they want to depoliticize the court by deeply politicizing it. And this is exactly what we would expect. This is like saying that the executioner is the one who is giving clemency because he releases the person from the burden of being in prison. I mean, it's a real twisted way of approaching it, isn't it? We're going to depoliticize the court by making sure that everybody understands we view, meaning the Democrats view, the court as a political instrument necessary for them to pursue their whims and whatever mechanisms of power they think they need. And that's all that it is. Judge Barrett was particularly strong today on those broad philosophical questions. She pointed out that she interprets the Constitution, that she will not, in fact, make decisions based upon her own beliefs about what is good. When we talk about beliefs, that's always implying a level of just judgment and choice between different matters, not about what is factual, what is necessarily objective, right? There's an element of subjectivity in it when you're entering into what you think would be most fair, for example, as a judge. That's irrelevant. What does the law say? What does the system we have here that people have voted for legislators to write and put into place, and that is all held together by our Constitution, what does that system produce based on the facts, based on the competing interests here? That's it. There should be something really mechanical in the thinking about a good judge. There should be something that almost feels like it's a Swiss watch ticking off the seconds. It shouldn't be. It's not a creative process. They're watchmakers, not oil painters. That's what a judge should be. And here's what Judge Barrett says specifically about that. Play 10.
I interpret the Constitution as a law, that I interpret its text as text, and I understand it to have the meaning that it had at the time people ratified it. Okay. So that meaning doesn't change over time, and it's not up to me to update it or infuse my own policy views into it.
It's very straightforward, isn't it? The law is the law. Even if I don't necessarily like a law, unless it is unconstitutional, I have to apply the law as written. Notice that is somehow, in our upside-down world of the media and the Democrat Party, that has somehow become a controversial position. When in truth, it's the most straightforward, it's the most obvious position one could ever have. Right? The law is the law. It's like a tautology. It's a statement of fact of the obvious. What does the other side do? Well, the law is a lot of competing things, and there's societal interest and pressure, and then there's this other stuff, and it's kind of like you're just making a souffle with everything in the kitchen, and whoop, whatever comes out of the oven's what you get. No, it's not how this is supposed to go. And I guess if anything worthwhile is being taken from these hearings, it's that individuals should see the difference in underlying judicial philosophy between the left and the right in this country. That the left, the Democrat Party, really does embrace a utilitarian view of the Supreme Court and really of legal interpretation in general. It's a means to an end. It's all just about competing forces and maneuvering to get what you want. There's no agreed upon principle. There's no statute. There's no law that's there that we just admit is there. It's always, can we find a way around it? Can we change the language? Can we reinterpret it to mean something else that we would prefer? This undermines the very foundation of the law itself, and that's what the left continues to do. One of the ways that they've been attacking Judge Barrett is to suggest that she would be the second coming of Scalia, which I think anybody in the legal profession could be so lucky. I mean, Scalia was a brilliant man and also a larger-than-life figure when it came to the law in his time on the Supreme Court. And she's also saying, look, I clerked for the guy. I appreciate what he did, but here's who you're getting if you confirm me. Play 11.
Justice Scalia, he was an originalist, right?
Yes, he was.
People say that you're a female Scalia. What would you say?
I would say that Justice Scalia was obviously a mentor. And as I said when I accepted the president's nomination, that his philosophy is mine too. You know, he was a very eloquent defender of originalism, and that was also true of textualism, which is the way that I approach statutes and their interpretation. And similarly to what I just said about originalism, for textualism, the judge approaches the text as it was written with the meaning it had at the time and doesn't infuse our own meaning into it. But I want to be careful to say that if I'm confirmed, you would not be getting Justice Scalia, you would be getting Justice Barrett. And that's so because originalists don't always agree, and neither do textualists. Justices Scalia and Thomas disagreed often enough that my friend Judge Amul Thapar teaches a class called Scalia versus Thomas. You know, it's not a mechanical exercise.
Well, I'll wait till the movie comes out.
So there she is explaining the separation even. Now she's saying it can't be too mechanical, which is true, but it also can't be a creative process. Right? It can't be a process by which you're imbuing into the law. So the separation between a textualist and an originalist, getting deep into the weeds, is one thing. The separation between left and right is, here's the law. What does it say? What does it mean? And what precedents apply? And the left is like, well, no, we think it'd be better for society if we just said the following. Oh, okay. That's what they do. And perhaps the best example of this is the one that's most central in many ways to this confirmation. There's been a ton of talk about Obamacare, but that's just the Democrat senators trying to grandstand here in an election cycle. Obamacare, healthcare, that's all they want to talk about, even though this has nothing really to do with ACB. But the other issue is, of course, abortion, one in which when you look at the Roe v. Wade and even Planned Parenthood v. Casey, you have two Supreme Court decisions that are just legally indefensible. And everyone knows this who understands anything and is objective, but the left really, really likes those things, does not want that to change. People might feel very differently about state government in, let's say, California, where they would, I'm sure, have zero restrictions on abortion for all 9 months of a pregnancy, when next door in Utah, they would, I don't know, I'm guessing they might enact, if not a ban on abortion outright, a ban after, 10 weeks or 20 weeks. 3 months, whatever it may be. So they don't want to get to that point where they have to actually defend this. They like just pointing to Roe v. Wade and saying it's in the Constitution, when we all know it is flatly not in the Constitution. We all know that it's actually not something that anybody should think was a constitutional right in the first place. And then there's one of my favorite ways that ACB was slapping down the various attempts to get after her today. And she was borrowing it from her predecessor. I got a crash course into home title theft recently, and it's shocking how easy this is. You better pray this crime never happens to you, because it can ruin you financially. It goes after your most valuable asset, your home. Here's what happens. The legal titles for all of our homes are online. They're in servers up in the cloud, and a cyber thief can hack into these, find your home's title, forge your signature on a quick claim deed stating you sold your home. Then loans are taken out against your home until all your equity is gone and you're left in debt. The usual identity theft services do not protect you from this. That's why you need the specialists in home title protection at Home Title Lock. Go to HomeTitleLock.com, register your address to see if you're already a victim of this crime and don't even know it. You can also get 30 free days of protection with promo code RADIO. That's HomeTitleLock.com. Register your address. See if you're already a victim of the crime. Don't even know it. But also get 30 free days of protection with promo code RADIO.
Judge, I'm deeply concerned about ways in which your approach So something that may sound abstract to folks watching stare decisis or precedent, that means your approach to reviewing and reconsidering and possibly overturning long-settled cases may overturn some of the very principles for which Justice Ginsburg fought her entire adult life, principles that protect settled, fundamental rights for all Americans. What might this mean? Cases like Griswold versus Connecticut that establish married couples have a right to obtain and use contraception in the privacy of their own home may be in danger of being struck down.
You could say may and then put pretty much anything in the future behind it, and technically we don't know, but that's absurd, right? No one's going to strike down contraception. There's no push to do that. There's no effort to do that. It's just not reality. But they're trying to really scare people around this. They're trying very hard to terrify people around the issue of contraceptives. And they're doing it with a whole bunch of things, healthcare, with gay marriage. I mean, they think that ACB is going to come in there and everything that the left holds dear will all of a sudden be up in smoke. Now, that's not true, and they don't really believe that, but they're saying it anyway, because they're trying to generate as much fear and outrage of this nomination as they possibly can. And one of the best tricks that I've seen Amy Coney Barrett use to deflect all of this, and it's not new, but it's great that she gets to call it this, is the RBG rule. She is citing Ruth Bader Ginsburg and her confirmation when she was asked questions as precedent for why she will not, because remember, she's also a Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals judge right now, ACB is, she will not weigh in on something preemptively to tell you how she would or would not rule on a case. And that's what, other than the gaseous speeches from Democrats about how, the Constitution means, blah, 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 and the libs, the rights of a woman to blah, 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 a lot of that going on. Other than that, it's all, well, what do you think about this case? What would you do here? What would you do here? And it's pretty much ACB saying, well, that case was decided, so that is now the law. That case is decided, so that is now also the law. She's not going to play their game. But it's tough to tell if they really think they're going to trip her up. If they do, they're delusional. Or if what's really happening here is that the Democrats are just trying to ask these questions and then use the refusal to answer, in this case, applying a huge and hypocritical double standard, applying the refusal for ACB to answer as though that's some, or insisting that that's some evidence of inconsistency, deception. It's just not true. But it seems that that's what they're trying to do. ACB had to remind them today, you want judges, you don't want legal pundits up here. Play 8.
Trump made claims of voter fraud and suggested he wanted to delay the upcoming election. Does the Constitution give the President of the United States the authority to unilaterally delay a general election under any circumstances? Does federal law?
Well, Senator, if that question ever came before me, I would need to hear arguments from the litigants and read briefs and consult with my law clerks and talk to my colleagues and go through the opinion writing process. So, if I give off-the-cuff answers, then I would be basically a legal pundit. And I don't think we want judges to be legal pundits. I think we want judges to approach cases thoughtfully and with an open mind.
Now, that's a perfect answer, but it also establishes something and shows you something. The Democrats, the libs, do want legal pundits on the bench. They would, if they had their way, they would put people that go on MSNBC and say, yes, Trump is a traitor, Russia collusion, I was a federal prosecutor before, and Trump should be in prison. They want one of those people on the bench. Gives the Democrat base whatever they want. So it's funny because she says, Coney Barrett says, you don't want pundits, do you, Senator? And the real answer in the senator's mind is, oh no, we want liberal pundits to be the Supreme Court justices.
So that's the way the process works.
Yes, it would start because there was a law, then there was a lawsuit, then there was an appeal, then the court granted cert, and then the court decided the case.
Is that true no matter what the issue is, whether it's gun, abortion, health care, campaign finance? Does that process hold true for everything?
Yes, you always know. Judges can't just wake up one day and say, I have an agenda, I like guns, I hate guns, I like abortion, I hate abortion, and walk in like a royal queen and impose, their will on the world. You have to wait for cases and controversies, which is the language of the Constitution, to wind their way through the process.
What about that should be considered controversial? That's a term that you will always see the media use very selectively and with propagandistic intent all the time, right? Controversial conservative. That's a favorite term. This is a controversial liberal. You'll notice that. Or a controversial left-wing justice. No. Maybe a justice who the right pounces on, but not a justice who's actually controversial. Coney Barrett's telling everybody here what we all should know. What should just be a widely understood fact of the judiciary, and yet we also, at some level, all understand it's not really the way it is. That's not the way things have been for quite some time here. There are judges who show up. I mean, I think the most egregious example is Justice Sonia Sotomayor, who it's just, what would a left-wing activist want? That's what she does. Almost without exception. I'm sure there's some 9-0 cases where I'd say, fine, she applied the law here, fine. But on a lot of very big cases, Sotomayor is whatever the left wants, she would go for. That's not good. That's not good because that's not the function of the judges. As we know, we keep going back to these underlying principles, and the left tries to dispense with them and pretend that there's some other judicial philosophy that would make sense that would not just be a hyper-politicization of the court, but that's what we're seeing happening. There is a hyper-politicization that has been going on for a long time. And we'll get to court packing. That still hasn't gone away. There's a lot to discuss today. Judge Barrett told Senator Feinstein that she would just adhere to the law. What could be more straightforward? But again, controversial constitutionalist. Play 7.
Well, what is your view
Of how it should factor in? Let's see. I think that any issue that would arise under the Affordable Care Act or any other statute should be determined by the law, by looking at the text of the statute, by looking at precedent, the same way that it would for anyone. And if there were policy differences or policy consequences, those are for this body. For the court, it's really a question of adhering to the law and going where the law leads and leaving the policy decisions up to you.
Anyone have a problem with that? Oh, yes, no, Democrats do. That's not what they want. We are trying to achieve, and this is one of the biggest takeaways of this entire hearing and the mess all around it. Democrats want what they want from the Supreme Court. Conservatives are pushing for judges to act as judges and apply a judicial philosophy of what is the law and how should it be applied. Not how would I like the law to read and then apply that interpretation. It's very, very important difference between the two sides. And I mean, I think one of them is intellectually defensible and the other just flatly isn't, but the other is very powerful. And a lot of people want power. They want their way. Remember, the Supreme Court for a lot of libs, too, especially on things like abortion, it's, in a sense, they think it's like a dispensation from on high. Well, everything that I've done here, the Supreme Court says it's okay, therefore it must be ethical. The Supreme Court says it's okay, therefore I must be right, which is always such an interesting approach to take, considering that we all would agree that there have been horrific Supreme Court decisions in the past. Dred Scott comes to mind right away. There have been Supreme Court decisions that are morally, legally, intellectually, ethically indefensible. But throughout the course of the 20th century, the left got used to, well, once we get something, it's always and forever, and we'll do everything to protect that thing that we have from the court and act like that's written in stone. All of their victories are permanent. All of our judicial victories are temporary. That's really at the heart of this. Judge Barrett certainly sees that. Now, on to the point of attack against her that we're going to continue to see here. They're trying to say she's Scalia. They're trying to say that she's going to be part of gutting the Affordable Care Act. They're trying to say all these things. The one that I believe, are hoping to really make inroads against her, and I don't think they think it's going to stop her confirmation, but I do believe they're hoping to use it to undermine her and to score political points as in things that will translate to votes in just a few weeks here, political points against her. And it's going to be on the issue of her. They won't call it religious extremism, but they'll keep insinuating at it. And then the main point of attack will be on gay rights and LGBTQ issues. I think that's where they're really going to go after her. Now, she's already begun to defang this attack, I think. I think she's already started to create a pretty solid defense against it by saying things like this. Play clip 9.
You're Catholic.
I am.
I think we've established that. The tenets of your faith mean a lot to you personally. Is that correct?
That is true.
You've chosen to raise your family in the Catholic faith. Is that correct?
That's true.
Can you set aside whatever Catholic beliefs you have regarding any issue before you?
I can. I have done that in my time on the Seventh Circuit. If I stay on the Seventh Circuit, I'll continue to do that. If I'm confirmed to the Supreme Court, I will do that still.
You know, this I think also shows you the difference in mentality with the left and the right. I mean, for one thing, you know, there are times when, even though as a conservative I want a thing, I understand that we can't have that thing because we agree upon a process, and it's a question of judgment, desire. I think this thing would be better, but I can't get it unless I break a principle, unless I break an agreed upon rule, regulation, and therefore I won't do that thing. For the left, it's all utilitarian. It's all whatever gets it done, whatever works. That really is the mentality. That's the philosophy. I mean, they're constantly just wallowing in their own sanctimoniousness. They really believe that everything that they're pushing for isn't something that might be a little bit better, and the other side has a different point of view that could also be good or be better. It's their way or literally everyone's going to die. The Green New Deal. Their way or literally women are going to be in chains and enslaved like in The Handmaid's Tale, which you're seeing already, women showing up in Handmaid's Tale costumes outside of the Supreme Court. And they like to misuse the word literally, right? Of course. So that's what's happening here. She's already establishing that the attacks on her religion are unfounded and unfair. The left is hoping to just use that, though, for their base sees this, too. Catholics who actually believe Catholic doctrine, according to Democrats, are weirdos. And I know there are Catholic priests out there, especially Jesuits, who are formerly educated me and can be very smart and very good educators, but a lot of them are a bunch of commies. I'm just going to say it. And some of them probably listen to this show, but I'm just telling you the truth. A lot of Jesuit commies running around. And there are Catholics that effectively replace actual church doctrine with their own social justice doctrine. But those who don't make that choice are considered weirdos by the Democrat Party. What do you mean you're a traditional Catholic? What do you mean you believe marriage is between a man and a woman, abortion is wrong, is evil? What these are church teachings still to this day. But if you are a Catholic who actually believes that stuff, it's very clear and thinks that public policy should reflect that, not through some theological process or something, but through the actual mechanisms of government and of the legislature, the Democrats view you with a disdain. They view you as some kind of a curiosity. So nothing so far has shown any even hint of a crack in what I've told you all along here, that Amy Coney Barrett is well qualified, more than well qualified, is a fantastic legal mind, is an originalist, and is doing, is going to be fantastic under the pressures of this moment where we know the Democrats are looking for anything they can get on her. They're looking to destroy her. I mean, if they could humiliate her, force her to tears, and have her run out of that Senate chamber in front of millions and millions of people watching, they would do it in a heartbeat and think nothing of it, even if they had to lie to do it. The only thing that holds the Democrats back, the only thing that has prevented them from going full Kavanaugh on her so far, is that they're not sure how to do it, and they know that a misfire, they know that an ambush that turns into an obvious debacle, and for which there can be no support from any intelligent person, that's not going to look good for them. So once again, what holds them back is not about what's right or about what's fair. It's about what will work and what won't. And they haven't figured out the angle of attack yet. They're still trying. They're still hoping that they're going to get there. And you've got people like Senator Blumenthal who are making wild statements about how this could destroy the court as we know it. What? Play 5.
The Republicans have the votes on this committee. They can prevail by raw power, but they don't have the American people on their side. They don't have history on their side. They are losing because the American people want the next president and the next Senate to choose the next justice. And the American people want the Affordable Care. They want reproductive freedoms and sensible common sense gun violence prevention. But there is an agenda here, and it is a pretty ugly one. The President of the United States decided in the days after Justice Ginsburg's death, he wanted to put another justice on the Supreme Court so she could decide this election. He made it absolutely clear. He articulated it. And this justice must commit to recuse herself. Otherwise, she's going to destroy the legitimacy of the court and her own credibility. That's why I demanded that she, in fact, take herself out of any decision involving the election.
Everything this slimy Senator Blumenthal says is either untrue or a misdirection. First of all, the notion that the American that he speaks for the American people, no, that there's some poll that determines what the United States Senate will do. Everyone who understands politics in America knows that if Republican senators, any Republican senator who is not trying to win over some independents and Democrats for re-election, so that's what Collins and Murkowski's, but any red state Republican who doesn't go forward with this would be done in politics. The base will turn on them forever. And the only reason that you can have Collins and Murkowski, and who knows what's going to end up happening with them, but the only reason that they could even be question marks or out is because their votes are not needed. Somebody else drops, and all of a sudden this doesn't go through. That's a whole different situation. And you even saw this when you had the senator from West Virginia vote in favor of Kavanaugh after all the stuff that was happening there, because the Democrats knew, look, if we want a Democrat senator in West Virginia, we got to let this guy do it. So that's a political calculation of expedience, and that's what you're going to. I mean, I think that everyone understands exactly what's going on here when you have people like Blumenthal Joe Manchin, by the way, I was blanking on his name for a second. Joe Manchin of West Virginia voted for Kavanaugh to be confirmed because West Virginians, based on their internal polling, which I heard from some Democrat activists I know at the time, was showing over a 70% wanting Kavanaugh to get put on the Supreme Court. So that would have been suicidal politically for Manchin not to vote for Kavanaugh. So that's why they allowed that, right? But anybody else, and it was okay for him to because he wasn't the deciding vote. Anybody else who were to break ranks as a Republican now, what are you going to take? You're going to take political advice from Blumenthal? Come on. Nobody's that dumb, right? But beyond that, this demand that she recuse herself, that's not how recusal works. Somebody saying something about another judge doesn't mean that judge has to recuse at all. You could do this to anybody, right? I mean, think about this. A sitting president could say about any Supreme Court judge, well, I expect so-and-so is going to do what I want him to or her to on this case. And then that judge all of a sudden has to say, okay, well, I can't be on the case anymore. Gee, think about how easily that could be abused. No, that's not how recusal would work here. It's absurd. But Blumenthal's absurd. This whole thing, they have no argument, folks. They've lost. That's all this comes down to is they lost. They didn't convince RBG to step down when she should have under the Obama administration. They just worshiped her too much. They made a bad call. She stayed in the job too long, and now they're paying the price. That's it. Everything else is noise.
I'm deeply concerned about the Affordable Care Act. And what we did yesterday, I feel very good about it, is we brought real people into the room showing the real harm that this nominee will do to people like Connor Curran, a 10-year-old boy in Ridgefield, Connecticut, who suffers from an incurable disease and is alive today because he has health care access afforded by the ACA. So people with pre-existing conditions who would lose their coverage are in that room.
What about all the millions of people who had their plans canceled and then had to spend a whole lot more money for a crappier plan under the ACA? Did they talk about any of them? Oh, no, I don't think so. Okay. This is a policy dispute. This has nothing to do with ACB's nomination. This is about what the United States Congress has produced. And in terms of the usage of raw power, which Blumenthal before brought up, right? Oh, this is just the Democrats. I'm sorry, the Republicans using raw power. Obamacare was a raw power exercise. They used a once in a generation Senate House majority, supermajority in the Senate to ram through legislation that not a single Republican was on board for. And it was really massive legislation, thousands of pages to reorder our healthcare system. And in the last election, you had a whole bunch of candidates on the Democrat side who wanted to get rid of it. They wanted to go with the Medicare for all plan. Well, why did we go through all this stuff with Obamacare so that a few years later Democrats could say, let's go for the full-on Medicare for all? Because we all know then that turns into socialized medicine. Just wait a few years. But it was so great, it was so awesome that they were willing to scrap the whole thing. That's a fact. That's reality. But again, that's also a policy dispute that has nothing to do really with ACB, except Democrats think the Supreme Court is where policy gets made.